System. Energia total. Comando imediato.
The boys froze, phones trembling, the light from screens painting their faces jaundiced. One of them, the tallest, rose and thrust the phone forward as if that would make it less wrong. "It's just a clip," he said, voice small and practiced. "Then put it away," Tank said. He could smell cheap cologne and adrenaline, now. The boy's friends laughed, a thin cover for the surge of fear. The tallest boy, Micah Trent, tried to play it off. "Come on, lady, be a sport," he said, the words like a slap. The crowd's breath quieted. Someone called for an ambulance. Chris Rook's assistant fumbled for a microphone, eyes wide, chewing a gum of guilt and opportunity. Tank stepped forward. He did not touch the boy. He took the phone instead, his gloved hand lower than a palm's breadth from the screen. "You delete that," he said, steady. "You apologize. You wait for the police." Micah laughed, because that had been his plan. Laughter on camera, a trending clip by evening. Laughter is what keeps the conscience in the dark. He swatted at Tank's hand like a fly. Fingers met pavement again as Eleanor curled, winded, hands over her head. The video in Micah's phone showed her face, wet with the gravel and the winter, and the angle made her vulnerable in a way he had not imagined until that moment, until her eyes opened and looked at him, not with accusation, but a weary inventory of what the world had cost. Something like shame startled the boy, a lightning strike that sketched the possibility of consequence. Not shame enough to stop him, but enough to stall. Tank felt the moment and used it as a lever. He took the phone, thumbed the display with a practiced flip, and with the authority of the group around him, insisted the footage be deleted in front of everyone. Hammer recorded the scene on his own device, less for spectacle than evidence, then handed the phone to a sergeant who arrived minutes later. The police came with measured steps, officers trained to moderate the surge of crowd. The downtown prosecutor's office later called it assault and elder abuse, charges that fit into the legal frame without melodrama. Micah's followers dwindled within a day as clips of the shove spread, and then, more importantly, recorded the protector's calm intervention. Sponsors reached for distance the way a ripple tries to escape a stone. The obligations of brands are merciless when faced with sudden public outrage. Eleanor sat on the bench beside the wall, her hands folded over a small paper cup of thermos coffee that had gone cold. The paramedic had checked her over for cuts and a concussion, and had given her the sort of look that translates medical detachment into human concern. "You've got a lot of support," he had told her. It was a line that felt thin next to the weight of a long life. She watched the protectors stand like pillars, helmets under arms, faces made soft in the light that fell between the names.
In the stillness, she thought of a different sound, the faraway boom of a mortar, the close ringing of a friend's laugh in a trench, the small, precise syllables of letters that had names crossed out. Memory came in flashes, mud sucking at boots, the smell of heat and smoke. And with those memories came an understanding she had never quite shed. Sacrifice is often private. Dignity does not demand spectacle. She had kept that lesson because the world had given its own ways of testing it. Now a boy had tried to convert her dignity into content. Whatever Micah had hoped to gain, the town did not grant him. By nightfall, curated outrage had unwound his initial cachet. Chris Rook's team, whose cameras had been pointing awkwardly at the scene, posted a short statement, less of an explanation than a shuddering, expressing regret at being present and promising cooperation with authorities. The clip of the shove splintered across platforms, layered with different commentaries: anger, grief, righteous denunciation. Will Smith, whose voice carried weight beyond the internet's collapsible trends, posted a reaction that was blunt and aching. He called the attack unacceptable, not because it would gain a headline, but because the image of a veteran being targeted would not relent in his head. His words were a salve and a hard mirror. Millions watched, and sponsors who had once lined up for influence checks now lined up for distance. To Micah, the fallout felt like an avalanche. Notifications exploded. Brands that had been courting him sent terse emails. The platform suspended his account pending investigation. The boy who had wanted to be remembered for a laugh found himself in the more lasting memory of shame. He slept badly in the days that followed, haunted not by the number of lost followers, but by the steady replay of Eleanor's face. He tried to say that he was sorry in comments and in a shaky live stream, but apologies typed in the half-lit shame of a browser tab read hollow. He needed to meet the people he had harmed. Months passed, with the slow machinery of consequence turning. Micah answered to the courts in modest ways. Community service hours, a mandated class on media ethics and empathy, a short stint of probation. He did not get the sort of criminal sentence that makes for cinematic justice. He got something quieter that might actually change him if he let it. He showed up to the classes with a face made new by worry, and there he first encountered a room of stories he had never heard. Veterans who spoke about memory as if it were ballast. Survivors who told of the way the world can misread courage for a call to spectacle. He learned to listen. Eleanor watched much of it from a distance. The town rallied around her in ways that felt both humbling and practical. An account opened for medical bills, neighbors bringing casseroles, a group of riders who offered to ferry her to the memorial when she could not drive.
The Black River Writers, Tank's group, held a small ceremony and presented her with a patch, a simple gesture that meant more than the sewn leather. "We don't ask why you stood in the weather," Hammer told her, folding the patch into her hands. "We know what standing does." The public moves toward restitution can be performative, and sometimes they are, sometimes they are not. Micah's real test came when he arrived at the community center to stack chairs and sweep floors, sleeves rolled up, palms roughened. He had thought repair would be a single dramatic act, video apology, one-time donation. Instead, it was repetition, showing up, listening, admitting the small, scandalous truth that repentance takes time and embarrassment. He volunteered at the memorial rides, his hands handling flags and straps with a nervous reverence. He listened to Eleanor when she spoke, and she, in turn, spoke without the theatrical magnanimity of a martyr. "You hurt me," she said once, not softening the words for an audience. "But I don't want you to be hollow." Time does not erase the scene at the wall. It layers meaning over it. Sponsors remained wary for a while, but the town's response helped refocus intention. Chris Rook's team retooled how they operated in public spaces, implementing a clearer code for consent and intervention.
Platforms updated policies, not just as bureaucrats, but as a response to the human cost of viral reach. Will Smith's reaction, public and forceful, convinced some viewers to look harder. His presence amplified the conversation beyond outrage and toward tangible support. The hardest image, months later, was the one that steadied into place. A parade of riders threaded the main street, engines humming in a low concord that felt like an organ. Eleanor sat in a sidecar with a scarf wrapped around her throat, the patch on her lap, the wind lifting silver hair from her collar. Tank rode beside her, helmet unclipped, a look of careful pride on his face. For Micah, there was no camera to catch the moment he walked in the procession. He had been given a chance to help marshal the formation, to hand out water, to do the unglamorous work that actually holds a community together. At the wall they stopped. Eleanor's hand brushed the brass names, and a child from the town came up and placed a small flag in the crevice. There was no triumphant music, no rhetorical flourish, only a clean, honest quiet, and the steady slap of leather as the riders stepped down. People who had watched the footage that first day brought tambourines of coffee and casseroles, letters folded into pockets. The donation account for veteran causes had swelled. The town had not magically healed every wound, but it had chosen to act. Micah knelt at the curb, and no cameras, no clumsy narrative to force a line. He said what he had been learning to say. "I'm sorry." It was not a grand absolution. It was the simplest thing a person can offer. Eleanor looked at him, her face a map of years.
She measured him, then nodded. It was the kind of forgiveness that did not erase consequence, but made room for better behavior. It was not magnanimous. It was practical, a chance for him to rebuild his life on a different foundation. The educational program that followed was small at first. Classes on media responsibility, community panels where veterans told stories, a partnership between the riders and the high school for mentorship. It was the kind of program that favored the slow accrual of trust over spectacle. Micah taught a class that first semester, his voice rough at the edges, his hands steadying as he demonstrated how a camera can be used without trampling a person's dignity. The riders showed up to mentor and to model restraint. Eleanor attended, not as a celebrity, but as a living witness, her presence a reminder that policies and sponsors ultimately serve human beings. When the town gathered for the memorial ride the following year, they rode with a deeper attention. The sidecar was part of the tradition now, not an emblem of pity, but of belonging. The protective boots that had once stood on pavement and demanded a phone be handed over were still there, but their posture had softened into stewardship rather than spectacle. The column of bikes passed the wall in a slow, steady cadence, engines tuned down as if in respect. People lined the street, flags in hands and eyes lifted. Eleanor sat in her sidecar and let the wind gently find the seams of her coat. She thought of the names on the wall and of the boy who had learned to listen. She thought of the viral glare that had tried to reduce a life to a clip, and of the way a town had moved together, rumble and patch and conversation, to answer that coarseness with something sturdier. If there was a single image to hang the story on, it was that. The veteran and the protectors. A simple ride that meant someone else would notice if the wall began to be knocked at.
The lesson was not a sermon. It was a practical invitation. Watch, intervene with care, expect accountability, and then do the harder work of repair. If this story moved you, stay with it. Like, subscribe, and consider supporting veteran charities or local initiatives that protect the vulnerable. Small acts of attention build the kind of community that keeps dignity from being a cheap prop.